Hi everyone, this is Scott with KastKing. We got another great new product for you. This is our KastKing Kalibrate. It's a line spooler that has a built-in line counter as well. So you can spool up your spinning reels and your casting reels and keep track of how much line you're putting on. Also works great for putting on backing if you want a specific amount of backing you want to put on your reel before you put your line on. We also include 2 line bosses that come with it. There's a lot of little tips and tricks that I'm going to teach you as we go through this. So let me take you through how to use it for a casting reel and for a spinning reel. So the first thing you want to do with your Kalibrate is to remove the T-handle from the storage position. So what you're going to do is turn this counterclockwise. It'll go about 180 degrees and then it'll stop. Don't force it, and then you can pull it straight out. So you can see it's keyed. It's got threads on one side and it's got a flat spot on the other side. And then we've got an arrow on the end of the T-handle and also an arrow on the arm here. So if you line those two up, it will slide right in quickly, and you can turn it about 180 degrees and it'll stop, and that holds it in its storage position. So I'm going to take that back out for now, and this will be used to mount the spool to the Kalibrate here in a few minutes. The next thing we want to do is take a look at the clamp. We have 3 different positions for the clamp. This position is for a small diameter blank. We can rotate it 90 degrees for a medium diameter blank and rotate it one more time, and this will accommodate up to a 1-inch diameter blank, and then you just swing the arm over and screw it down to clamp onto your rod. So what you want to do is select the clamping position that works for the rod that you have. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to start out with my casting reel first. Make sure your reel is mounted on your rod. You take the Kalibrate and you want to mount it on your rod above the first guide. And at this point you want to make sure when you're mounting it, the counter itself needs to point towards the reel. So make sure that you can read it as you're holding the rod and reel. Then I'm going to open up my clamp. I'm going to clamp it onto the rod just above the guide. Flip this lever over and screw it down so it holds it in place. And make sure you don't over tighten it. You want it tight enough to hold, but not so much that you're going to crush your rod, so just be careful with that. Then what we need to do is we need to put the spooling arm in the right orientation. So on the back of the Kalibrate we have a little arrow right here that's molded in, and then on the arm itself we have casting and spinning. So this is a spring-loaded arm. You pull it down and you rotate it. So in this case I'm going to take the casting mark and line it up with the arrow on the Kalibrate. And now I'm ready to mount the spool. So the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure the lever arm for the line counter is disengaged. It's not holding the line onto the counting spool. So right now it's in the off position. This is the on position. And inside there's an arm in there that pulls the line over the counting spool and it holds it on there. And that's how it engages the counter as you start pulling the line. So I'm going to flick that back to the off position. And now we're ready to mount the spool. One thing you want to note is on the side of the Kalibrate, we have printed on here which side of the spool the line needs to come off of when you mount it onto the spooling arm. So now I'm going to pick up the T-handle here, and you want to make sure that you mount the line boss onto your spool of line. You can see there's a hole in the line boss. You feed the line through it, then wrap the elastic band, the line boss, around the spool, and then you tighten it down. So there's a sliding collar right here you can use to gain more tension or pull it out to reduce the tension, and this is how you apply tension as you're spooling up your reel. So like we said, on the Kalibrate we want to make sure the line is coming off the left side of the spool so it's mounted correctly. That way we won't have any line twist when it comes off the back of the spool on the Kalibrate onto the top of the spool of your casting reel. So as I pull this and it rotates clockwise, I know that the line is coming off of this side of the spool. So that means that's the side I want to insert the T-handle through. So I insert it through the middle, and then I've got this arrow on the tip of the T-handle, and I also have an arrow on the top of the mounting arm where the spool goes. I want to line those two up because it is keyed, and then you can slide it right in. You want to make sure you leave it a little loose. You don't want to over tighten it here. So pick a groove that's a little bit, gives you a little bit of space, and then you want to turn the T-handle about 180 degrees and it'll stop. So once it stops, don't force it any farther. you're good to go from there, and now we can feed the line through. So the next thing you want to do is pull off a little bit of line, and you want to drop it into this groove on the top of the calibrate. And once you do that, you can kind of look in there too and make sure it's on top of the spool, it's lined up with the pulley inside, and then flick the arm over, and that will make sure the line stays on top of the counting pulley. Then what you do is feed this through the first guide, run it back to your reel, tie off your reel, and you can begin spooling. Now as you're spooling, if you need more tension, just tighten up that line boss, or if you need to reduce tension, you can pull it out a little bit. And before you start reeling, you want to reset that, hit the reset button on the front of the counter, and then as you're spooling it onto your reel, you can count the number of feet of line that you're putting on your reel. The process for spooling your spinning reel is very similar. So you can see I've got my reel mounted to my rod. I've got the calibrate here, and again I want to make sure this lever is in the off position. This is what engages the arm to pull the line down onto the counting pulley. This is off, this is on, so make sure you have it in the off position. Then I'm going to mount this onto my rod above the stripper guide. So I choose a spot above the first guide, tighten it down. Don't tighten it too tight, you don't want to crush your blank. You want it just tight enough so it's not going to spin on your rod. Now we're ready to mount the spool. So next we want to mount the line boss to your spool of line. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute. The line boss is an elastic band with an eyelet in the middle. You want to feed the line through the eyelet, and then we have an adjustable collar on the back side to get your tension. Tighten it up for more tension, loosen up to decrease your tension. And then just like on the casting reel, you can see on the front here we've got printed instructions for the spinning reel. So you can see as the spool is mounted on the back side of the calibrate, the line needs to come off the left side of the spool. So we got to make sure the orientation is correct. So this will prevent line from getting twisted as it goes through the calibrate. So to do that, I've got my line boss mounted. I pull on the line, and from this orientation where you guys are looking, you can see the spool will spin clockwise. So that way I know the line is coming off of this side of the spool. So that's the orientation I need to add it to the calibrate. So in that case, I take the T-handle, I feed it through from this side, and then I have an arrow on the end of the T-handle that I line up with the arrow on the arm, and I can slide it all the way in. I want to turn it about 180 degrees to lock it in place. But remember, I need to leave plenty of room, plenty of play, so that the spool can spin freely. So then what you want to do is pull out a little bit of line, and you want to feed it through this groove on the top of the calibrate. Lower it down into and onto the pulley inside, and you can look inside and see that the line is in the middle of the pulley, and then you flip this lever down and that'll hold the line onto the counting pulley that's inside the calibrate. Then what I want to do is run the line through my stripper guide and then back to my reel, and I can tie this off and I can start spooling up. So once you get this tied onto your reel, then you can reset the counter just by pushing that button. It resets it to 0. Then you can start spooling up your reel, and you can see how many feet of line you're putting on your spinning reel. And with this orientation, you won't have any line twists, so works great for fluorocarbon or mono lines, and you're going to make sure it sits nice and level on your reel. The KastKing Kalibrate. This is something you're going to want to have in your toolbox. It allows you to spool up your spinning reels with no line twists, allows you to spool up your casting reels with perfect tension, and you can actually save money by evenly splitting a 300-yard spool between a couple different reels, or applying the amount of backing that you want in your casting reel or spinning reel, or even a fly reel. So the KastKing Kalibrate, go check it out.